Good evening. Thanks for being here.
But we get along. I'm saying that I should continue.
Good evening. My name is Sandy. I work here at Shepherd of the Lake Lutheran Church, and I'm just one of many who are here tonight in the Communications Team Committee. And we started to form this, about 6 months ago. And this is not the first. We've done several over a period of the last 4, 5, 6 years, whatever. And you're in for a great evening of information. And I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Clemens, who is the attorney here, and then she will then turn it over to Janie. And I want to thank you very much for coming this evening.
You let me know when my 20 minutes. You know lawyers like to talk. Am I on? Yeah, so I don't want to talk your ear off, but I do want to share some information with you. First of all, thank you so very much for coming out. It's such a beautiful day, and you could be on your back deck with your beverage of choice, and I appreciate you making that sacrifice by coming into the church today. As Sandy said, my name is Lauren Clemens. I've been practicing law 40 years. I love what I do, and no, I don't intend to stop, and it's one of those blessings in life. Why I love what I do is that I am able to help people, you all, your neighbors, here in the community, to get the documents that you need in order to make sure that you are taken care of during your lifetime should you become incapacitated, and then make sure that your wishes are made known and made legal for when you pass. People ask me, what is estate planning? That sounds so fancy. It's really not. Estate planning is getting those documents that are legally binding to appoint those financial agents, those who you want or trust with your checkbook to be able to take care of your bills, take care of your business, should you be incapacitated. We have healthcare agents, the people that you appoint and whom you trust to be able to make medical decisions for you, but only if you're unable, because you always have the right to make your own medical decisions. And then the third thing for estate planning documents is for you to make your wishes known as to who is to receive your property when you pass, and who you want to be in charge of that process, and what you want that process to look like. So estate planning is really not that scary, it's just really logical, and it's the way that we put in writing what you want and make that binding on the family and on your medical team and on the court system, everyone. Some people will ask, well, I've got a power of attorney, why do I need a will? Please know that those powers of attorney, whether we're talking about healthcare powers of attorney or financial powers of attorney, that's where you've appointed someone to do your work for you, do your healthcare for you, that authority passes away when you pass away. So although those documents are very, very important to have during your lifetime, they have no effect on what happens upon your passing. So that's why it's so very important for you to have together with those financial powers of attorney and healthcare documents, a last will and testament, and perhaps a revocable trust. When we pass, the world at large will design, or the state of Tennessee states who receives your property if you don't put it down in a legally binding document. So if you have a blended family, that certainly doesn't work, because it doesn't, the state of Tennessee can't do all the things in our laws that say who receives assets upon your passing that you could do as an individual. And for example, if you're second marriage, husband and wife, maybe you've got children by your first marriage and your spouse have children by his or her first marriage, then if you have simple I love you wills, I love you dear, you get everything, and then go no further than that, then it's the family which spouse died last wins. You know, the first spouse to die, their children, his or her children, is absolutely cut out because there's no legal process. The stepchildren of the surviving spouse has no right to inherit. So we do a lot of fixing those particular loopholes, because most people divorced. I think more than 50% of America now has had at least one divorce, if not more. We have we have children, sometimes by even multiple partners. And for you to say who you want to have your assets upon your death is very, very important to get that down. I have a lot of blended families where we would give half of the estate to the husband's children and half the estate to the wife's children. That works fairly in some instances. Some blended families would rather go by percentages, so that if the wife had 75% of the equity or value in the marriage and the husband had 25%, sometimes we make that split, that they take care of one another, and then when the surviving spouse passes, they give 75% to the wife's children or her designated beneficiaries and 25% to the husband's children or designated beneficiaries. You see, the beauty of having an estate plan that's designed especially for you is that it's my job to put on paper what you want to happen, and then I make it legally binding so that when you pass away decades from now, your wishes can be and will be implemented. Another question I receive often is, what is the difference between having a revocable or a living trust or having an estate plan using a traditional last will and testament? A traditional last will and testament is a very important document. It appoints your executor. It can appoint who receives your assets upon death. But there is a legal action there that's necessary to make that last will and testament binding on the court and on your family. And that legal process is the probate process. So if you have an estate plan using a traditional last will and testament, then that means we're going to court eventually when you pass to implement your wishes. We bypass that a lot now by using a living trust, which is also called a revocable trust. And when we have a revocable trust, it's like having a contract with yourself. In other words, no legal court process is necessary to make your revocable trust enforceable. With married persons, we often have a joint revocable trust, meaning you've got the same estate plan, you agree on who's going to be your successor trustees, and those are the people that are like executors that wind up your affairs for you, and you agree on who gets what when the two of you pass away. Sometimes we would rather have a revocable trust for each spouse. Again, it just depends on your own financial circumstances, your own personal circumstances. But if we have a revocable trust for each spouse, again, you appoint who you want your successor trustee to be. Maybe you appoint your spouse to have lifetime income off of your investments, and then you give it out to your family in the manner that you like. So again, there's not one right answer for everyone in this room. Everyone's got a different idea. I have a natural son, I have a stepdaughter, and I have a foster daughter who, they're all three just as my own. But if I left it up to the state of Tennessee to say what happens, well, yes, my son would inherit, but my two girls wouldn't. And that would not be fair, and that's not what I want to happen. So yes, in my circumstances, I certainly have to have a revocable trust so that they don't have to go through the probate process, and that my assets can flow in the manner I want them to flow. Sometimes having that probate process is desirable. And you're like, why would anybody ever want to go to court? Well, generally, no. Generally, we want to stay out of, having the court involved in our business. But sometimes, particularly when there's blended families, you may need that probate judge as a referee. If we have a disgruntled child or disgruntled sibling, and the judge will listen if they bring a proper petition, but the judge will also administer your estate according to Tennessee law. So sometimes having that judge as the third-party person to enforce the Tennessee probate law is helpful in family situations. Again, if there's not any issues amongst the family, certainly a revocable trust is great. Sometimes if there are issues and you particularly don't want your assets to be publicly known, then a revocable trust is great, because those are not filed in the court. There's no accounting to be given to the public. So if there's one person in your life you absolutely do not ever want them to know what you had when you died, then you might consider having a revocable trust. So it's all what's best for you. And I would caution you about using the online services or the online documents, because when I talk to you as my client, we have a relationship, and I go and I want to know these details so that I can draft the documents that are best for you and to achieve your goals. When you go online to print off a Susie Orman will or what a LegalZoom, you don't have a relationship with that person. There's, it's a bank of computers. You might get a sales rep somewhere, and those people don't know you. You can't stop by their office and introduce your kid to them. They're not there. Me, I love to meet your children. I love to meet the ones that we'll be working with to make sure that your estate plan is implemented correctly. And more important than having a relationship with an attorney is that people complain about legalities and all this legalese and, why do we have to say things a particular way? Well, particularly in probate law, it matters. It matters what you say. It matters very much so. It matters that those wills are signed properly, that they have two witnesses, and if they're not signed, if the will particularly is not signed properly, then it is no good and it did not achieve your purpose. There was a state in which I was involved, and I promise not to tell too many more stories, but a state I was involved representing a creditor in the estate, so I wasn't representing the estate itself, but a very, very wealthy man out of a county adjacent to us, the will wasn't signed right. The attorneys who prepared the will for him mailed the will to him, let him go get it signed. Well, he didn't sign it in front of two witnesses. He didn't sign it in front of a notary. Well, and he didn't want to leave his children any of his multi-million-dollar assets. Well, guess what happened? His children had that will set aside because it wasn't valid. And if you don't have a valid will, then it doesn't matter what he wanted on his papers that was in black and white. It matters then what the law says. And the law said that his next of kin were his children. And even though everybody in town knew they'd been estranged for decades, that's who received his property. So it's just a tale of woe to share with you. To just doesn't matter how wealthy you are or how comfortable you are, if you don't have the correct documents signed properly with your wishes on there, then the court has to do what the law says is necessary. So if you have those blended families particularly, please think about who you would want to be in charge of your health care and in charge of your checkbook should you become incapacitated. Maybe your spouse predeceases you. And then, of course, who you want to wind things up and to receive your hard-earned money once you pass. Do you have any questions for me? Yes, sir.
What are, example, probate costs? Is that a percentage of the assets, or is there a set number for probate costs?
That's a very good question. The gentleman asked me in Tennessee, do the probate costs, how are they calculated? Like in California, it is a percentage of the value of the estate, and that's where a lot of the revocable trust became so popular, was to avoid that California probate expense. Here in Tennessee, our probate cost is not a percentage of the estate. Basically, the court cost runs around $500 to $600, and then the attorney fees typically range $3,500 to $5,500, depending on the complexity of your estate.
You say attorney fees or the executor fees?
No, sir, the attorney fees.
The attorney fees.
Yes, sir. The executors in the state of Tennessee are allowed to charge a fee for their service. I mean, they're doing a lot of work. You can imagine having your house cleaned out and getting it sold and making sure your bills are paid. And typically, those hourly fees run around $50 to $75 an hour in our area.
That's based on hours.
Yes, sir. Or it can be a percentage, 1 or 2%. Our local judge will not go over 3% of the value of the estate. If you want your executor to have more, we can actually write that in the will. Yes, sir.
Perhaps this question is premature if this is going to be covered later. A few of us are from out of state who have had all our stuff done up north with our lawyers up there and stuff, and we're wondering how that needs to be tailored to Tennessee law. That's
a very good question. The gentleman wants to know if you have out-of-state documents, how are those tailored to Tennessee law? And there the nuance is, the question really isn't whether those documents are legal or not legal. It's whether those financial agents or your executor or your healthcare agent will have ease of use of those documents. If you have a will that's validly signed in another state, then the state of Tennessee honors that will. But it's the expense of getting that will honored in our local court system that makes it more expensive. Now, regarding the financial powers of attorney and healthcare powers of attorney, those you really should have in state. And that's more of an ease of use of those financial agents or healthcare agents that you're asking to come in and help you, because you don't want to be in a circumstance where you're incapacitated and then your healthcare agent or your financial agent is being told, no, they're not, that document's not going to be honored because it's from wherever, and whether that person is telling your financial agent properly is a question, but you don't want them to have to suffer through that question. I have had clients to tell me that Ohio documents have not been honored at University of Tennessee Hospital. I was aghast. Those are supposed to be honored all across the United States, reciprocity for healthcare documents. But again, if you've got a person, that's in charge of doing whatever he or she's doing at the hospital and is wrong, then that just puts an impediment in front of your healthcare agent where it could be simply taken care of, beforehand.
We can certainly bring all our stuff to you and have you look through it and say, here's what this needs to get straightened away.
Now you know why I love what I do, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Two questions. Someone told me that if you want to be cremated in Tennessee, you have to have your children's permission.
I'll let Janie address that. She gets more gasped off of that than anything. I don't want to steal her thunder, so that's a Janie question.
Do you have an associate if I need something or my kids need something and you are moved or you're on vacation or something? Is someone running the home office?
Well, believe it or not, most things that I do are not on an emergency basis. Now, if someone waits or or has an emergency and needs to go to the hospital, then we're going to do everything that we can do to get you in. But let's see, it's been a while since I've had a vacation, but I'd like to take you up on that idea. But typically, if you've come into my office and you're my client, you've had a stroke, you're at the hospital, your healthcare agent is calling my assistant for a copy of the documents. They can be faxed or emailed. Excuse me, I've got a tickle.
Need one?
It's in my purse. Yes, ma'am. Hi.
I think maybe a similar question with the gentleman. I have a trust made 15 years ago, maybe in California,
Mhm.
maybe more than that. But I've been using it ever since I moved here to Tennessee 13 years ago. It's been okay, but I wasn't sure. Somebody tells me legally I should maybe change it since I'm living in Tennessee.
And the lady's asking me, she has a trust, it was created in California. What happens now? With trust use, it's so much more pliable than last wills and testament. But you being a Tennessee resident can say, I declare this trust to be governed under Tennessee law. But whether you want to do that or is that a good idea for you to do that, that's more of a question for you to discuss with an attorney, whether it be local attorney or your California attorney. Okay, because there's different nuances regarding trust laws. Yes, sir.
What's the advantage of a trust over just a straight will and testament?
Of not having to go to probate for the family.
Okay, so that's the question.
Yes, so that's the ultimate bell ringer there, is that when you have your assets titled to a revocable trust, and then when the two of you pass away, then whomever is your successor trustee, all he or she actually needs is that trust document, the death certificates for you, and then we get a federal ID for you, which is the way that once you pass away, then you have to have a federal ID for your estate. So with those three things, then the financial institutions, banks, investment houses, whomever, will allow your successor trustee access to your funds. So it's pretty immediate, just as soon as the death certificate can be obtained.
And you can add and subtract assets within that trust as things go along.
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't hear you.
So you can add and subtract assets as life goes on.
Oh, yes. If you buy your first house here in Tennessee, you buy it in the name of your trust, or if you already have a home, we title your home to the trust. If you then sell that house and buy another, then you just sell as trustee and buy as trustee. It's a really pretty seamless process. It works well. Yes, ma'am.
This is probably a question that we would ask you in the office, but if you have an adult child who's living with somebody, they own property together, I die, I leave money to my son, what claim does that person have if he should predecease her?
If they are not living in a common law marriage state, then the partner wouldn't have any legal claim on the assets.
Okay, so.
On the
they live in
inheritance.
North Carolina, so I would have to check and see what to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Which are more cost effective, having a trust or to go through probate?
It just depends on your own circumstances. There's no one right answer to that. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Does it make any difference if you've had the trust for a long time and the witnesses to that trust are both deceased?
In Tennessee, we are not required to witness a trust creator's signature. So here in Tennessee, that wouldn't matter whatsoever. And regarding wills, that's when it becomes important as to how the wills are signed. So if there's and again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but in Tennessee, what we have is called an attestation clause. It's like an affidavit that says that the witnesses swear that they saw you sign and that they swear they saw each other sign, and then that's notarized. Then if the witnesses happen to pass away before you do, then that issue's taken care of. Yeah. Again, there's a lot of nuances. Yes?
Related again to the out-of-state issues, just to make sure I understand, are you saying if you already have documents that are out of state, do they need to be totally recreated in Tennessee, or do you just need to have a Tennessee attorney sign other papers saying that those already created documents are, you agree are valid in Tennessee?
No attorney could say, you know, here, I'm going to make an affidavit that those out-of-state documents are okay. You know, I can't practice law in whatever state that you came from. I can prepare new documents, or another attorney can prepare new documents. Again, whether those documents will be honored, whether the out-of-state documents would be honored by whomever you're doing business with or whomever your health care carrier is, that's something I can't represent to you. I can just tell you war stories that there's been occasions when they've not been honored. Yes, ma'am.
The trust we have is like a binder. So if we would bring a binder into you, would you just go through it and replace what needed to be replaced with Tennessee documents?
I have lots of binders in my office.
Or just, we have to start from scratch.
It would have siblings to sit there with. Typically, what I do is I go over with you as to what your wishes are and who you want your trustees to be and where you want your money to go when you pass away. And I read the documents to see, is that meeting your wishes? If it does, then typically we do an amendment to make the trust operate under Tennessee law, which is pretty insignificant financially, actually. Yes.
One quick question. The revocable trust, you have to then take your assets and transfer the ownership to the trust, correct?
Okay, Glenn asked, do we transfer the assets to the trust? There's a little bit of difference there, so let me be sure that I can explain this. Number one, we do not put your retirement assets into the trust, okay? Those are called qualified assets, the assets that you have not paid income tax on yet. Those cannot be transferred to the trust. But those are not probate assets either. Those assets pass by beneficiary designation on your IRAs, your 401s. But on your non-qualified assets, which are your regular banking accounts, your regular investment accounts, your home, as I said, those, we either title those to your trust or we make those accounts payable on death to your trust. Either way, we're avoiding that probate process, and that's the goal.
Is there an additional cost then to do that transfer?
In what way, Glenn?
I'm under the impression that you create a revocable trust, that's a document, but then you have to take whatever assets, maybe your home, and you have to have that retitled so that the trust is the...
I'm with you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, that's a very good question. When I prepare a trust set, that's part of what I do, is I prepare the deed for your home, entitle it to the trust. So that's all part of what I do.
Okay.
Some firms charge extra for that. I can speak to those. But regarding your investment accounts or your banking accounts, those are things that only you can do. But I give you a memo about, what to do. It's a trip to the bank or calling up your account rep. It's a pretty easy process. All right, I've got to go here.
I've heard that Tennessee has something called a Tennessee Common Property Trust. Can you explain the advantages or...
Do I get the pie in the face now?
I apologize.
That's a very wise question, and it's very important. She's asking, does Tennessee have a community property trust? And yes, we do. And it's very, very important discussion to have with whomever is reviewing your trust with you, because there are certain capital gains tax advantages to having a community property trust. There are some downfalls of having a community property trust. So there's, not everything's a panacea, but Tennessee Community Property Trust is certainly something that I explore with my clients as to whether it would be beneficial to them or not. All right. I'm sure my time has to be up.
Cost, is it like by the hour to write a trust, or do you have a standard fee?
I find it's more fair to have just a standard fee, because you can tell I like to talk, and I don't want to charge people for, oh, let's talk about your restaurants now. But that's my practice. I prefer a flat fee for service. Some folks don't. Some folks do the hourly thing, but to me it seems more fair to do the flat fee for service. Yes, ma'am.
And you said that the 401k could be part of a revocable trust?
Title to the trust.
So my financial advisor said that I could put my beneficiary as the trust.
All right, now we're talking apples and oranges.
Oh, okay.
All right. I said that your IRA retirement assets cannot be titled to the trust. It has to remain in your name. You're the employee that earned the money and got the credit with the IRS. Okay, so the account holder always has to be you. We didn't discuss beneficiaries.
Okay.
That's a
Well,
different thing.
That's a different thing. So I'm dead and I'm not going to be part of the account anymore. It's the owner. So.
Then
but I
it
don't
becomes an
want
inherited IRA, and it goes however you've designated on your beneficiary form.
Oh, see, I don't want those people to get all that money.
Well, there you go.
Are they in this room?
I'm sure the church here would take some donation.
Do life insurance policies go through probate?
No, sir.
No.
No, beneficiary. All right. I really have to stop, but go ahead.
So if there's a trust, I would be the trustee?
Yes.
And
If
then
you're
I
the
would have- And I
creator.
would assign an executor to carry it out if I pass?
Right, it's called a successor
So I'd be the
trustee.
trustee in this
Mhm. Yeah, you're always the manager of your own assets, as long as you're alive and competent. My friend back there, one more. You have one more question?
Are these trusts recorded anywhere? Let's just say you've had a trust and it's a revocable trust. But you say, I don't want this trust anymore. I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to start all over again. Are they recorded somewhere?
No, they're your private estate planning document. That's part of the beauty of the trust, is that only you and your trustee and eventually your beneficiaries see it, no one else.
Well, say a spouse dies.
Yes?
And then it changes to and then it, as I understand it, becomes an irrevocable trust. Is that recorded somewhere?
No, sir. Trusts are not recorded.
Okay.
I'm sure it's Janie's turn. Thank you.
Need a stretch or do anything for a few minutes since you've been sitting for a while? I am Janie, and I'm with Click Funeral Home. I'm the funeral director, and we're right over there. We've been out here 14 years, and I still have people say, well, I didn't know there was a funeral home in Tellico Village. You're in it almost. And people will say, well, is this a funeral home or is it a church? And I'm like, yep, it's both. So the church operates on that end as far as their offices go. The funeral home operates on this end, and the chapel's in the middle. They use it for church services, and we use it for funeral services. So that's kind of how it works. But I just want to share with you quickly a few things tonight that you may already know and you may not know. The first thing I want to tell you about what I'm going to say is I'm not here to sell you anything, okay? That's not, am I on? Yeah. That's not my thing. Do you ladies especially remember when you used to go to Tupperware parties or Mary Kay parties, or Pampered Chef parties. You take you take the catalog and find the cheapest thing you can find. And you think, I'm gonna buy that and get out of here just as quick as I can, because that lady's gonna follow me to a bedroom somewhere to take my order. I'm not gonna follow you anywhere tonight. I'm not taking your phone number or your address. I won't follow up with you. I won't haggle with you. This is purely for information. I want you to know this information so you can make good choices. I want to reiterate something Lauren said, just because I'm in the middle of it right now. I have a lady who has died. She's a widow. She has nobody at home as a spouse. Her son is incapacitated. She's at the medical examiner's office because who can sign for her release? Do you know anybody in charge to do that? So it's been quite an ordeal. I was on the phone yesterday with the medical examiner's office for a long, long time. What are we going to do? That's why it's so important to name somebody who can take care of these things. And your power of attorney, one thing, the power of attorney does work what to do with your body when you pass away. A healthcare power of attorney. Everything else dies and it's no good. But with your healthcare power of attorney, that person can come in and tell me, I want to cremate, I want to take the body from the medical examiner's office. So please, I worked a little bit, I'm not an attorney, but I worked a little bit in law, and my thinking was, close your ears, Warren. I don't care what happens to my stuff when I'm dead and gone. That's not mostly important. What's important to me is what happens if I'm not dead. And who's going to take care of my affairs and things if I can't do it? So to me, the powers of attorney are very important. And like I said, especially because I'm in the middle of that right now, we have to do that. And it's the same way for cremation. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute, who can sign for your cremation. But there again, everything we're going to talk about is Tennessee law. So anything we discuss here can be used at any funeral home. You are not tied to Click Funeral Home. You're not tied to Janie. What I'm going to talk to you about tonight, you can use anywhere. So it's good information to have. I'm going to start with some frequently asked questions, but I want you to kind of show your little packet that you have here. These questions are what we're going to talk about here briefly and answer them, so you'll make notes on those if you want to. There's a little form on the second page, and it says death certificate information. You see that little form? There should be one for everybody. That's why I wanted everybody to have a packet. This is the information I would need, or any funeral director is going to need, to get your death certificate when you pass away. The information down the left-hand side, people make books for this and all kinds of charts and things. All I need is the information down the left-hand side. If I could, and it were legal, I would pay you to fill out that left-hand side and bring it to me or somebody, because nothing's worse than you're sitting with the family, somebody's just died, their hearts are broken, they've been at the hospital for 2 weeks, they're worn out, their brain's scrambled, and I have to say, well, what was your mother's father's maiden name? How far through school did they go? And they look at me like, shut up, we don't care. But we have to, because about 2 days from now, Lauren, they're in my office going, we need our death certificates so we can do business. Until I have this information, we can't get your death certificate. So please, just down the left-hand side, if you will fill that in, if you think we might be your funeral home, I would love for you to come by and bring it to me. When you come to me, I'm not going to ask you for any money. I'm not going to ask you to sign up with me. This will just be on file. So if and when you pass away, and if it's sudden, we'll know exactly how to start with getting a death certificate. When you come see me and bring me just this little piece of paper, I'm going to give you a little card to put in your wallet. And that little card's going to say, my arrangements have been made at Click Funeral Home. That way, if you're in Timbuktu and you're in a car accident, we hope none of this happens, but things happen. Somebody finds that little card, they call me, I pull out this paper and it says, oh yeah, they want to be cremated, I know what to do. So that's why it's so important. It's information, that somebody have that information in case the time comes and something happens to you. Then the third page, I would like you just sometime to sit down with whoever is important to you, if it's a spouse, if it's your children. And I was the daughter. Mother would try to talk to me about things, and I would actually take my hands and put them over my ear. I don't want to talk about it. I just don't want to talk about it. And my little mama was 69 years old. She was at the Tennessee Valley Fair in Knoxville with the seniors from her church. She ate a foot-long hot dog. She was sitting on the bus, marking the people off as they got on the bus, and she dropped dead. She never knew what hit her. boy, I wish we had done some of these things. But I wouldn't talk about it because I didn't want to think about it. You know, it's only smart. My maybe best friend in the world was in my office yesterday, and she said, but you know, it's just hard to talk about. I said, it is, but you need to talk about it. Otherwise, you're sitting around there again. I'm looking in those eyeballs, and they're just looking at me like, please, I don't know, and I don't care. I remember the funeral director said to us, he said, well, what do you want to do about this? What do you want to do about that? And I'm like, we don't know. Our mama always told us what we wanted to do. She told us how to do it and when to do it, and we didn't have a clue what to do. And so much can be taken care of if you'll just take that little middle sheet and that back sheet and talk about things. Even the back sheet's important, but that's important to have at home with your spouse or with your children. The middle sheet is definitely, please bring it to me or a funeral home somewhere so somebody has on file what you want to do. So we're going to talk about a few questions that come up over and over again, and we'll have some time for questions as well. What do you do if in the morning you wake up and your spouse doesn't? And it happens, you know? And you think, what do I do? My daddy told me once, he said, if I die, don't get all crazy and scream and holler, just call clicks. Well, that's not the answer. You can't call clicks if you wake up and your spouse doesn't wake up. We can't pick up a body till somebody officially calls us. So if that were to happen in your household and the person dies, you have to call 911. You're welcome to tell them when you call, I think my husband has died, so please don't come with the bells and the whistles and everything. Come quietly, but the ambulance will have to come. We're making some progress. Sometimes the assistant medical examiner now rides on the ambulance out here, and sometimes he doesn't. So there are two scenarios. If you call 911, the ambulance will come. If the medical examiner is with the ambulance, they can do the death pronouncement there, and they'll call the funeral home, and you can go, we can come straight to the home. If the medical examiner is not riding an ambulance that day, they pick you up, take you to the nearest hospital, and that's where the death pronouncement is done. You have to go through the emergency room, and a doctor has to do the death pronouncement. So one of two ways, and we don't have any control over that. Hopefully one day, every time they come, the medical examiner will be there, but it's not true now. Now there's a third option, and I know people, when you say the word hospice, people are like, I just don't want to talk about it, kind of like I was with my mama. But if you ever get to the point and a doctor suggests hospice, I'm all over it. For lots of reasons, they do a lot of help and they do a lot of care, but if you're under hospice when you die, you'll call the hospice nurse when somebody passes. He or she will come out, make sure the person has died for sure, and then we can come straight to your home and pick up the body. So if it's a long extended illness and the doctor says, I think we need to think about hospice, please do. For that reason, it just makes it so much easier. It's more economical too, because you don't have to pay for an ambulance ride to the hospital, and you don't have to pay for the emergency room, and you don't have to pay for a doctor just to tell you what the hospice nurse can do as part of our hospice care. So those are the three different ways.
Hospice nurse could call you.
Yes.
From my home.
Yes, and we come straight to your home.
Good. So 911, we don't have to call the
Not if you're under hospice. If you're under hospice, correct. If no hospice, you must call 911, and then we just have to go whether they take you to the hospital or if the medical examiner is right. That's right. So those are the two ways we can go. All right, what if I have all my plans made, and when I open the file, it says you want to be cremated, but you're out in Tucson, Arizona on a vacation, and something happens and you die out there. Then what happens? The beautiful part about having a pre-planning is you'll have your little card, and if somebody will just call us, we'll take it from there. If you're going to be cremated, what we'll do is have you cremated where you pass away. It's easier to arrange for a cremation. So unless somebody's very against that, we'll find a funeral home, we'll work out all those arrangements. The hospital will probably call us if you have an accident or something happens. And we'll know what to do. We'll take it from there. We'll find a funeral home, have them go to the hospital in Tucson or wherever you are, pick up your body, do the cremation, and send the cremated remains back to us. So we'll take care of it wherever you are. If you move from here, you just come by. If you know that you're going to be moving, pick up your file, take it with you wherever you're going. It happens here a lot because when the first spouse dies, the next one may go live with the children or whatever. So you just take your folder with you wherever that you go and find a funeral home there. Can you prepay? Yes. Prepayment's not something I push really hard at all. If you want to do it, we'll talk about it. There are good reasons to do it. Prepayment locks in your charges. The only time it's really important to prepay is if somebody's going into a nursing home and you're looking at, managing some money and moving some things around, that's a real important time to go ahead and prepay a funeral. But day in and day out, most people in Tellico Village, we're 97% cremation. And that's from $2,000 to $4,000, depending on what you want to do with your cremation. A direct cremation is $2,000. I look at people all the time, and I'm telling you, you'll probably have $2,000 just as well then as you do now. So I don't push you to pay. You know what you have. You know what you want to do. Your financial person can work with you on that. But if you think it's a wise move to go ahead and prepay, we can do that. It's done with an insurance policy. That insurance policy is good anywhere. So there again, if you were to move, you don't have to worry about that. You still got your funeral prepaid with an insurance policy. So that clear as mud. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Just, it does to me, but I've said this so much, I know exactly what I'm saying. So another question is, do I have to be embalmed? And of course, the answer is no. If you're going to be viewed, you're going to be in a casket, and we're going to have a viewing, and people are going to come by and look at you, then you have to be embalmed. If you're going to be traveling somewhere, if we're going to send your body from here, say, to Michigan in a casket, in an airplane, yes. If you're going to be on a public carrier, you must be embalmed. I had a lady who was Jewish, and she was going to Florida. And so they don't believe in embalming. So we packed her in dry ice really good and got her over to the airport. And when we got there, it was during all the COVID mess. And when we got there, the fella said, "Oh, you're late. She can't go today." I said, "Oh, but she's in dry ice. She's got to go today." I said, "You're going to have a real mess come about nighttime." And he said, "Well, let me see what I can do." But normally, you must be embalmed to travel on common carrier. Who writes my obituary? Have you ever opened, y'all still take paper, some people do, some people do. But in the Knoxville Sentinel, have you ever opened the paper and seen sometimes they're like 4 columns? They pay dearly for that. They have paid 57 cents a word for that obituary. But somebody needed to write it, and they had this big, long obituary. But I say, you know better than anybody how much obituary you want. A lot of times it's a child, and they'll say, "Do they care how much I write?" And I'm like, "No, at 57 cents a word, you can write as much as you want to. You're just going to have to pay for it." I have little forms over there on the table. It's just an outline of what you might want to say in your obituary. We have a website. You may or may not be familiar with it. You can go to clickfuneralhome.com, and anybody that we're serving, they'll have a picture of them, and it'll have their obituary. It kind of tells you how to write it. But who knows better than you what you want to say? I have some people that want to say, "Janie died," and that's it. Other people want to go on and on and on and on. That's totally, you don't have to do an obituary. There's no rule or law that says you have to. The connection out here, they usually cost about $100, $125. The Sentinel can get very expensive. Not long ago, I had just a usual size obituary that I sent to Jacksonville, Florida. And they said it was going to be $1,600. Now, I'm sorry, folks. I think that's just ridiculous. But, if you want a $1,600 obituary, I will put it in that paper for you. But you're going to pay dearly for it, I'll tell you. But that's just, it's a very personal thing. There again, like what Lauren was talking about. You decide what's important to you. But I have the form where you can fill it out, keep it with your paperwork, or bring it and put it here if you want to. But what you want your obituary to say. What benefits are available for veterans? A lot of people misunderstand this. If you're a veteran and you just served at least 2 years in active duty military, you are entitled to a grave space at the Veterans Cemetery in Knoxville. And if you've never been there and you're a veteran, it would be a really good field trip to take one day. I was there yesterday at 8 o'clock in the morning, but it was beautiful. But take a little field trip out there and see it. It's gorgeous. What a veteran gets, the veteran and his spouse can both be buried there at absolutely no cost. Okay? So that's a pretty sweet deal. That's your crypt, that's your grave space, that's your marker after the fact. So all that's what you're entitled to as a veteran. So if you even remotely think you're interested, go check it out and look at it. All you need to do to qualify is a DD-214. That's your discharge paper. So if you have that, we can get you qualified to be buried at the Veterans Cemetery. Everybody is entitled to the military service, where the honor guard comes and brings the flags and shoots the guns and plays the bugle. 2 years active military gets you that. And so you get a flag, you get a plot, you get a marker, do the ceremony. So that's what everybody. Now, if you're getting a pension or something like that, you need to talk with whoever works with you, because there are different levels of what you might get if you did. But that's for any active duty person who's been in the service. What about Social Security? Do you know what they pay? $2 $255. $255. But that's only if you have a spouse. They changed it. Everybody doesn't get that now, just the spouse. So if you're the last one left, nobody gets anything. But if there's a spousal allowance of one-time allowance of $255. And yeah, really, I told him with my mother, why don't you keep it, you know, because you have to call a number and you wait a long time to get them to answer. Is that right, Phyllis? You're agreeing? You wait a long time, and then they take a bunch of information and they say, well, we'll call you back in about 3 months. We'll make an appointment and call you back. So if you want to tie up that much time to get your $255, I say go for it. I just decided I had more things I wanted to do with my time. Okay, the question came up a while ago, who can give the okay for cremation? And that's the hot topic because, you know, when you say these things, the word gets out and it sometimes gets all twisted and miscombobulated. So I'm glad you asked the question and it was already on what we're going to share. If you're married and have a spouse, you've got it made. Your spouse can sign for your cremation. It's a form called a cremation authorization form, and your spouse signs that. If you're not married, that's where we have to start kind of being creative. If you don't have a spouse, we go to your next level of next of kin. And for a lot of people, that's your children. And let's say I'm working with a family right now, he has 5 children. And I have to have that form signed by all 5 people. Legally, your power of attorney can do it. Okay? If we couldn't find anybody and you have a health care power of attorney and it says you can, then they can sign it. The crematory requires that we at least contact and preferably have them all 5 or however many children you have signed. The reason being, once we cremate you, we can't take it back, number 1. We can't exhume you and find out anything if somebody doesn't like it. Number 2, we are required to at least let them know. And people all the time will say to me, well, we've not seen that son in 45 years, he's not going to care. But that's probably the son that if somebody whispered in his ear and said, if they cremated your mom and didn't tell you, you can sue the pants off of them. And all of a sudden he cares so much. He loved his mama and he just misses her. So the crematory does that to cover themselves. The Tennessee law will let us do it with the power of attorney. And that's like if somebody has no children and they have nobody who can sign. But if they've got 5 children, we started today, I'm going to get all 5 to sign a form for me. That's just the way we're going to.
I'm confused.
Okay.
So if I have 2 children, ideally they would both sign.
Right.
But could the power of attorney do it instead of the 2 children?
They can. The power of attorney legally can do it. This is, I don't know if I'd say it's morally, the crematory's not going to touch, they're not going to do the cremation if they know you have children out there and they're not aware that the cremation's happening. Okay? That's just to protect the crematory from somebody coming back on them. So legally, we use the power of attorney most of the time if there's nobody else to do it. If there are children, we want it to be the children. If we get way down into aunts and uncles and they're as old as we are and all that kind of stuff, then we'll go with the power of attorney. If there's nobody, we'll go with the power of attorney. Yes, sir.
Do your remains or cremation have to be buried?
No. You can do anything you want to with them. Once they'll come back to the funeral home, they'll come back to me. They're in a little plastic urn. You can do anything you want to. I even have a blanket letter from the Great Smoky Mountains National Park that says you can take them there and scatter them. I figure our lake's probably 5 or 6 feet deeper than it originally was. With people, they've taken Grandma out on the boat. Off she went, you know, we didn't plan it that way, but she did. So no, they're yours then to do with whatever. Keep them. I also have a safe here where a lot of times people will want to wait till the second spouse goes and then bury maybe together. So if you want to leave somebody here, there's no charge for that. I have a safe full of people. For whatever reason, people just can't decide what to do with them, so they're with me. A lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, maybe 3, I've had a widow say, I'm going to take him home with me. It's just going to be so sweet. And about a day or 2, she comes back and she said, it wasn't sweet. It was just real, it was just eerie. I can't do it. I said, it's fine. He can stay right here with me till you decide what you want to do. So, yes, you can do whatever you want to with the cremated remains. What does a funeral cost? I told you a cremation starts at $2,000. That's a direct cremation. That's where we pick up the body, do the cremation, and bring the cremated remains back to you. That's $2,000. A funeral starts out at $4,500, and then you add to it a casket, which can be anywhere from $1,500 to as many thousands of dollars as you want to spend on a casket. That's another part of my story. My mama always said she wanted a white casket. Mama died, we were at the funeral home, Daddy was just torn all to pieces, and my brother was no help, so here we are. But Daddy walks in the casket showroom, and there's a white casket. That sucker's like $8,000. He said, that's the one I want. I wasn't in the business. And so if that's what Daddy wants, that's what Daddy's going to get. Now that I'm in the business, I know he could have also had a white casket for $1,500, but nobody told us that. And believe me, I let the funeral director nicely know when I went to work for him. You didn't tell my daddy there was another. So this is why you want to do things ahead of time if you can, so you can think with your head and not your heart. You know, Daddy walked in, his heart was broken. Mama wanted a white casket, there he sat, and that's what he bought. If you come in ahead of time and look at these things and talk about these things, we can do it while we all have good thoughts about it. But you have your $4,500 for a funeral, a casket, then you'll probably have to have a vault to put in the cemetery. You'll have to have cemetery lots. So that's when they put those crazy commercials on. You think, there's no way a funeral could be $12,000. That's how it gets there. You have a lot of control over it, what kind of vault you get, what kind of casket you get, what burial plots you have, but still that's how it can eke right up. And I think, and I'm not pushing anybody, I want you to do what's good for you. That's probably why cremation is so popular. You know, you can do it for $2,000 as opposed to several thousand. But that's everybody's thing, and I want you to do, I never want anybody to do a cremation for financial reasons only. You know, there are ways we can work around everything, but if that's what you want to do. Can I plan ahead for my final arrangements? Yes, 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 you can. I've told you this already. Yes, you can, and yes, I wish you please would plan ahead with somebody. I hope it would be me, but if it's another funeral home, that's quite all right. I don't mean to be glib. There's enough business to go around for everybody, so I'm not out to try to. You know, sometimes people look at you kind of, and I'm like, that's okay, I'm going to get you one day. You know? But there's plenty. Yes, ma'am.
So you said if you plan ahead, like prepaid, which is kind of nice for the kids, they don't have to do all that stuff. It's an insurance policy type thing, so that if for some reason I'm moved, I wouldn't have to come, they wouldn't have to bring me back here.
That's right. That's if you pre-plan and you prepay. Yes, we do it with a company called National Guardian Life Insurance Company, and they're all over the United States. Every funeral home works with National Guardian. So all you would have to do is, if you know you're moving, come get your information and change your plans to that funeral home. If it all happens and you haven't done that, I will help, and they'll send your funeral home in Arizona will send me a bill, and I'll file the insurance for you. So yes, the insurance goes with you wherever you go.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, a friend of mine asked me to ask this question. She says she wants to donate her body to science.
Okay.
And she says she's got all the paperwork done and everything, but she had all the paperwork done in Colorado.
Okay.
Is it valid still here?
Well, it depends on where she's going to donate her body. That sounds like such a good thing to do, and it is a good thing to do, but it's a difficult thing to do.
Is it?
Yeah, you must be prearranged there. You have to already have that wherever you're going to go, say that they will take your body, because there's a lot of criteria. They don't want just everybody, so, you know, and then they would have to, how are they going to get the body? I mean, if it's in Colorado, I would look at doing something closer by somewhere maybe in Colorado.
Okay.
But that's just a place by place, but you must be prearranged with them. I can't even be involved when somebody wants to donate their body, but you couldn't just call and say, my friend died and she wants to donate her body, and they'll go, yeah, well, that's nice, but we can't do it unless there's a pre-plan. So contact the place where she wants to pre-plan. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, one of the spouse, sudden death at home. You know in your heart he's dead, or she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
We still had to call 911.
Right. Somebody,
if it's not a hospice.
Right.
Service.
Somebody medically, officially has to do the death pronouncement.
Okay.
And sign the death certificate.
So 911 comes and he or she is dead. That point, we still had to take him to hospital?
Depends.
To the dead body?
Depends on who's with 911. If 911 has a person who can do a death pronouncement, they can do it on the spot.
Okay.
And call us.
Then you guys come pick him up?
Yes. If somebody rides on the ambulance, used to that never happened, so I didn't even throw that out as a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's a possibility that somebody will be riding with the ambulance who can do the death pronouncement, and he will call us.
Okay.
He'll know that he can do that.
So he doesn't have to go to hospital?
Correct, not if you have somebody who can sign. Back in the day, which is really, really weird to me, the funeral homes also ran the ambulance service. Now that seems like a little bit of a, we drove a little bit slow and he didn't make it. But when they mean, we were a small town. I'm from Lenore City. You can probably tell I've lived here all my life. When they would pick up somebody and they were obviously dead, they would drive them by Dr. Shea's house. He lived right there up from the funeral home. And if it's the middle of the night, Dr. Shea would come out with his little bathrobe on and he'd clean it. Well, he'd go, yeah, they're dead. And that's all it took. That's all it took. Now, it's as if with everything, it's not that simple anymore. We must do it. So that's why it either has to be the medical examiner or go through the hospital or a hospice nurse.
So even his own doctor maybe happen to come and check, that's also good enough.
It has to be official by either the medical examiner or the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't go to one of those people call us.
No, his own doctor.
Correct, no, right, he would, I even had a husband once who was a doctor. And finally, he knew his wife was dying, and it was no, he can't, no, he can't. Finally, the medical examiner here, I think, got tired of fooling with it, and told him, yeah, you can. You know, but that's very unusual. Usually it needs to be an outside person. Yes, ma'am.
Another out-of-state question.
Okay.
If we already own a burial lot in a cemetery from a previous state, can we make arrangements for cremation with you? And if we do, does a family member or someone have to come receive it? Or can it be handled where you work directly with that out-of-state cemetery to get things transported? How does that
If
work?
that cemetery will do it, and that's a cemetery to cemetery regulation, so you'll want to check with your cemetery. If they'll accept them in the mail, I can mail them to them. Okay? Arlington will not. Somebody has to take them. So I have a funeral home up there. I mail them to that funeral home, and that funeral home takes them over there. And we could do the same kind of thing. The first thing would be find out if I can. Usually, if it's a larger cemetery, they may receive them by mail. And if they'll take them, then yes, I can just mail them to them, and nobody has to go. Now, I'll just tell you, it scares me to death every time I put some in the mail. I've never lost any, but I'm like, what if I lose somebody's mom? You know, that would just be terrible. And they'll pay you some insurance and everything, but still, your mom's gone. Never has happened. You can't UPS them, you can't FedEx them, you can only put them in the mail. So I've got the boxes in there to do it. I do it all the time. Never lost anybody, but it always scares me. So, see, we can have fun talking about this stuff.
So if you're donating your organs for transplant or whatever, would that not be a direct cremation then?
It doesn't have to be. My embalmer guys would much prefer it were, once they've taken everything out of you, that it were. But they can put you back together and do an embalming and a viewing if you want to, even with organ donation.
Okay, but if you're doing a cremation, and you said direct cremation where they just pick you up and take you, if they're going to take organs, then would that not be a direct cremation?
They've done that before we ever get there. So that's all decided back here on the front end. And I'm so glad you brought up that question, because that's a very important thing. Let's say you've had somebody at the hospital and they have died, and you're tired and worn out, and you go home. And we can't go to the hospital and pick them up. They won't call us until donor services gets involved, okay? Donor services is going to start trying to call whoever's number that they have. It doesn't say donor services when they call. It's just a number. Well, you've gone home from the hospital, you're tired, you're weary, you could care less, you're not going to answer that telephone call. Well, then we can't, they won't call us till they talk to you and find out whether your person is a donor or not. So if you get that call, and it's a rather lengthy call, but if you get it, if you want to be a donor, you need to talk to them when they call. Otherwise, after so long runs out, they can't anyway. And I'm thinking it's 12 hours maybe or something. Then the hospital goes ahead and calls and says, the family never answered the telephone. But you're calling me saying, why have you not gone after my husband? Well, you haven't told donor services yes or no, so we can't go till you do. Does that make sense? So watch for that phone call.
So what if it's just me and there's no husband to call? And I have a donor card,
Okay.
and it's on my driver's license?
Somebody at the hospital will be your next of kin.
Kids.
Well, that's who they'll be calling.
Okay, I guess I better tell them to answer.
Yeah, if people just knew, you need to answer that phone call, and it's a strange
They won't.
way that it happens.
They won't know who it is.
And as we know, to be a true organ donor, you pretty much, they have to harvest before you die. You know, without being too morbid. Once you have died, what they're going to take are eyes and skin and bones. They can't really do organs after you have died. So it's not as straightforward as it sounds like this. Most of the time, what you're going to donate is tissue and eyes.
So you take that out before you're completely dead?
The organs, they do. They keep you alive, so the organs are viable, you know, until they can take the organs, because the organs can't have been dead and then be able to be used. question? Anything else? Yes, sir?
I really appreciate your candor and your humor in discussing this matter. It's precious.
Well, thank you. I like to tell people, come in before somebody's sick. Come in before you get a bad diagnosis. Let's talk about it, because we can. You know, we don't really think it's going to happen. We can just talk about it in abstract. We can kind of have a good time. One of my best friends that I grew up my whole life, his daddy died. And he came in and we were doing his daddy's funeral. And when he got ready to leave, he said, well, Janie, this has been fun. I said, oh, Sam, don't go out and tell people we had fun. But we're all just people, you know, and we've got to get through this life just the best way that we can. And so I believe the more we can talk, the more you know. That's why the education, the more you understand, and then, you know, it takes a little, doesn't take the grief away, but it takes some of the scary. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you got something out of this this evening. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I have 3 diabetics.
Yeah.